Thank you all for joining me today. I've gathered you here to mourn the tragedy of 5 Digimon cards who did nothing wrong. Each of these cards carries with them some interesting design and theming that, sadly, were never appreciated in their time. Even when given the opportunity to shine with the support they had always dreamed of, they were passed over for some shiny, newer, younger cards. Or just simply didn't have the conditions needed to reach the potential they were clearly designed for. The history of the Digimon TCG has seen Digimon both popular and obscure see competitive success and meta relevance. Unfortunately, over the various sets, we've seen quite a few attempts at unique card design that never really panned out for one reason or the other. While some Digimon were released without much fanfare or success, many of these wound up finding some niche homes in future strategies, if not briefly. Many of these cards have very dedicated fans who have certainly done their best to give these underperformers their time in the limelight, but ultimately, time has not been kind. Our first entry today goes to Dex Dorugoramon from BT9, the macabre undead variation of Dorugoramon. Dex Dorugoramon is 13 to play, has 13,000 DP, and digivolves from a purple or black ultimate Digimon for a cost of 5. Or, for 2 memory, can digivolve directly from Dorugoramon himself. When digivolving, if it has Dorugoramon in its sources or is digivolving from the trash, delete all of the opposing Digimon with the lowest level. On deletion, you can play a purple or black level 3 Digimon from your trash for free. Or, if you have 5 or more cards with Dex or Death X in their name in the trash, you can instead play the dreaded Death Xmon. While the effects of Dex Dorugoramon may not sound like much on the surface, they're actually made to synergize well with the earlier stages of its evolution line. Dex Dorugoramon is able to delete a level 4 or lower Digimon, and the original Dorugoramon actually saw moderate success as a meta threat thanks to its own powerful abilities, able to gain DP for each X antibody card in its inheritables, and, on attack, delete up to 2 opposing Digimon with play costs lower than Dorugoramon's number of sources. The idea is to clear small bodies off the board with these pre-evolutions, evolve into Dex Dorugoramon, and destroy what's left. Sounds great, right? Well, no. As mentioned, the first iteration of X Antibody as an archetype began in BT7 with the release of the original Dorumon line, culminating in the mega-level Dorugoramon as the curve topper of choice. The alternative, Alphamon, who had been released a few sets earlier, was by comparison a significant power downgrade thanks to the abuse Dorugora was able to dish out on its own. The pendulum began to swing the other direction in the following set, with the release of the secondary X Antibody line featuring Oryumon, bringing with it a big incentive to replace Dorugoramon with Alphamon. Another set onward, and BT9 brought what would ultimately be Dorugoramon's salvation, in the form of an X Antibody line for an already X Antibody line. The Dex line are corrupted, dark counterparts to the original Dorugoramon line, and with the introduction of Dex Dorugoramon, Dorugora was able to reclaim its title as the primary boss monster once again. Yeah, no, I'm just messing with you. BT9 saw the introduction of Alphamon Oryuken, which would permanently solidify Alphamon as the poster child of the Black X Antibody archetype. Dex Dorugoramon and Dex Dorugoramon saw great success in these lists, since their abilities proved to be generically powerful and really didn't require the utilization of Dorugoramon itself. Without Dorugora, there simply wasn't a reason to play Dex Dorugora. The only chance Dex Dorugora had was finding a home with the other half of its identity. Being an undead Digimon gave it the opportunity to perform in undead or dark animal decks featuring another fan favorite introduced in BT9, Grand Drachmon. The problem? Dorugoramon has nothing to do with this alternative deck. Neither did the original Dorumon line. And with more dark animal support on the horizon, outside of a fresh new evolution line heavily slanted to support Dorugoramon specifically, it's unlikely that Dex Dorugoramon will ever amount to much more than Binder Chow. Our next sorrowful tale is that of Rust Tyrannomon from BT2. Ol' Rusty is 13 to play, has 11,000 DP, and is 4 to digivolve. If you have a green tamer in play, it can attack opposing unsuspended Digimon, the first ever example of this effect in the Digimon card game. Additionally, when this Digimon deletes an opposing Digimon in battle and survives, you can suspend another of your opponent's Digimon. Rust Tyrannomon was released in the first set in the English version of the game, and of course the second in Japan. This era of the game was much slower, and allowed for strategies that modern players certainly wouldn't expect to have been competitive to be able to flourish. Rust Tyrannomon was released with a full evolution line, including Freemon as an egg, Agumon, Tyrannomon, and Metal Tyrannomon. Unfortunately, even by early archetype standards, none of these cards were particularly great. Freemon would grant a 2000 DP buff, but only if the opponent had 2 or more suspended Digimon. Agumon came with a generic 1000 DP buff, which certainly wasn't bad, but by comparison to its red counterpart, would barely wind up seeing any play due to a lack of proper support or honestly a need for it. Tyrannomon had an on-Digivolve effect to check the top 3 cards of the deck and add a level 5 Digimon and a green tamer among them to the hand. The archetype even got a proper tamer target in the form of Taiga, a 3-to-play tamer which would reduce the cost to Digivolve into a Tyrannomon Digimon by 1, and gave all forms of Tyrannomon piercing, another rarity for the time. Finally, Metal Tyrannomon is 7 to play, Digivolves for a cheap cost of 2, and has 6000 DP. The Inheritable allows the top Digimon to unsuspend if it successfully deleted a level 6 or higher Digimon in battle. Now on the surface, these effects aren't terrible, but in practice were way more situational than the deck needed. Tyrannomon only being able to add a level 5 meant no reliable way to actually find Rust Tyrannomon, and Metal Tyrannomon's ability relied entirely on the opponent to be ahead in order to do anything at all. Compounding the issue, even by early standards, Rusty's stats were pretty lackluster, being expensive to Digivolve and below average in power. Ironically, Tyrannomon did actually establish itself as a rogue strategy at the time, but tragically, Rusty couldn't get within 100 yards of it. Despite utilizing Taiga for his powerful effects, the archetype was almost entirely red. In the first set, Red not only received a powerful red egg that synergized with Taiga, but also got to retain the aforementioned red Agumon counterpart while gaining access to much more powerful Tyrannomon alternatives, including a regular Tyrannomon with jamming, Dark Tyrannomon, a brutally efficient champion for the time, and an equally efficient Metal Tyrannomon. A stack simply containing an egg, Agumon, and Dark Tyrannomon with a Taiga in play would be a 9000 DP threat for a single memory, a very aggressive stat line for the current meta. With all of these upsides, Rusty really never stood a chance. Fast forward all the way to BT11, and Rust Tyrannomon was finally given the break it desperately needed: incentive to play a green-based Tyrannomon deck. Introduced was an entire new retrain of the evolutionary line, complete with a new Taiga to go along with it. A new Agumon with a more powerful buff, a new Tyrannomon with the ability to play tamers, and a new Metal Tyrannomon which strictly supported green, removing any remaining incentive to dedicate to a purely red strategy. Unfortunately, also introduced was a brand new and much more powerful Rust Tyrannomon, and to make matters worse, Tyrannomon was still nowhere near being a meta-relevant threat anyway. While pieces of the archetype have been able to find homes elsewhere thanks to their generically powerful abilities, BT2 Rust Tyrannomon was never really able to live up to the admittedly powerful effect it was given all the way back in the first few sets of the game. Our next casualty is Malo Myoton from BT3. Malo Myoton is 13 to play, 5 to Digivolve, and has 12,000 DP. He has Piercing and an All Turns effect where if another Digimon is deleted, gain a memory for each one. As the final boss of the popular Digimon Adventure 02 shows, and the final form of one of the most memorable villains from Season 1, Malo Myoton certainly does have his fans. During the first several sets of the game, Purple had a hard time finding a good direction. Boss monsters such as Metal Garurumon, Lilithmon, and Mastemon vied for control of the color's mismatched archetypes. Malo Myoton was actually one of the earliest purple bosses to be released with direct support for itself, mirroring the henchmen the villain had in the show, Arukenimon and Mummymon. These level 5s had similar effects, having when attacking abilities to pay 3 memory and play a Malo Myoton from either the hand or trash respectively, then deleting themselves, mirroring their brutal execution by Malo in the anime, and immediately triggering the memory gain effect of the card. Arukenimon actually got a pre-evolution that supported the line with Dokugamon, which on play would reveal the top 3 cards and let you add a level 5 and a level 6 Digimon among them to the hand, clearly intending to pick up the pieces of the latter. However, Dokugu was made green, likely since dual color cards hadn't been implemented yet. This pretty much removed any chances of it being able to see play in a cohesive archetype, especially since Arukeni could digivolve from it, but Mummymon could not. The gimmick of getting to play out a powerful Mega for reduced cost was unfortunately kind of lost in the awkward pile of support cards that it was released with. Myoton as an archetype received little bits of support here and there, most notably in BT8, with a more dedicated strategy focusing on a new tamer, Yukio Oikawa. Much like the other entries here, this unfortunately also brought with it a retrain of Malo Myoton himself, one with a much more impactful ability that actually gave the Myoton strategy some clear direction. Unfortunately, the abilities of the original Malo Myoton didn't really hold up to the modern standards for a Dex win condition. Memory gain is certainly powerful and has become a staple of many competitive strategies, but the gimmick the original Malo focused on, being able to cheat itself into play off of other cards, simply became very outdated very quickly. Myoton is still receiving support as of BT15, with a new Ace card and a powerful option card which actually give use to BT8 Malo Myoton that it failed to properly reach on its own release. But BT3 Malo Myoton is unlikely to ever make its way to proper meta relevance unless a purple strategy that heavily relies on deleting lots of your own bodies eventually emerges. Moving right along, we come across the unfortunate story of BT2 Black War Greymon. Black War Greymon is 13 to play, 4 to digivolve, and has 12,000 DP. If an opponent has a Digimon in play with 10,000 DP or more, you can reduce the play cost by 6, letting you hard play Black War for the low cost of 7. And, when attacking, if you attack the opponent's Digimon with the highest DP, you can unsuspend this Digimon without a once per turn restriction. For the rest of this section, I'll be showing you the alternate art of this secret rare Black War Greymon, as it is still to this day my favorite art on any card in the entire Digimon TCG. In the early stages of the game, Black War Greymon being a Mega you could play straight up for a mere 7 memory was completely unheard of, and would remain one of, if not the cheapest Mega to access for many sets to come. In theory, the attacking ability was also incredibly powerful, able to potentially clear an entire board of Digimon and still be able to attack into security afterwards. The reason this card failed to tear the meta to pieces is simply because the card was both too slow and incredibly easy to play around. At the time, there really wasn't a reliable way to make sure you could actually hit the opposing Digimon with the highest DP. Since he was also locked firmly into black as a color, he wasn't able to access the quickly increasing pool of Greymon support that would eventually grow to meme status. Black, much like purple, really had a hard time finding a proper identity during the early days of the game, and as such, couldn't really pull together a strategy cohesive enough to house Black War Greymon. As Greymon began to rise to prominence under the red umbrella, Black War was sadly left to collect dust in the binder and looked incredibly fantastic while doing it. Once BT8 rolled around, his time to shine finally came. Not only did Black War Greymon receive an entire proper Digivolution line and a cohesive strategy, but it established itself to be the more control-oriented brother to Red War Greymon, which suited the goal of BT12 Black War Greymon perfectly. The icing on the cake was BT8's iteration of Virus Metal Greymon, which brought the inheritable that Black War had always dreamed of: the ability to attack unsuspended Digimon. Everything was perfectly in place for Black War Greymon to finally become the nightmare it was destined to be. Except, of course, that Red preferred to have its cake and eat it too. Unfortunately, the black side of the Greymon support was still rather lacking, with BT8 Metal Greymon being the only truly viable level 5 that Black War Greymon could digivolve onto. EX1 Metal Greymon was still the preferred secondary level 5 outside of some lists opting to run Chimeramon, which lacked any real synergy with the many searchers and consistency tools available at the time. While these shortcomings couldn't stop BT2 Black War Greymon from seeing small amounts of play here and there, it was never able to solidify itself as an actual threat. Sadly, it was still just too slow and inconsistent. Eventually, Black War Greymon would receive more support to properly create a complete and cohesive red and black strategy, but before it arrived, the deck received Gaiomon, which was the last nail in the coffin that guaranteed this secret rare would never grace a competitive table. And finally, we've arrived at the tragedy of Hexablume from BT5. Hexablume is 12 to play and 3 to digivolve, with 11,000 DP. When attacking, trash 2 Digivolution cards from the bottom of an opponent's Digimon, then gain jamming if the opponent has a Digimon with no Digivolution cards in play. During all turns, Digimon the opponent controls that have no Digivolution cards are unable to attack or block. Leading up to its release in BT5, Hexablume was heralded to be a menace, a monster. Its effect was frightening to read, bringing with it the ability to freeze over the entire board in his icy wake. Generally speaking, the card design is actually pretty solid. It has a brutal floodgate and a secondary ability to help enable it. Hexablume, in all honesty, was given every benefit a deck could possibly ask for. On release, it not only received a full evolution line, full of abilities to help enable the overarching strategy, but even had access to a functional second copy of its vital rookie in the form of Promo Gomamon, and released with an archetypal support tamer, which would go on to become one of the most infamous tamers in the game, Sora and Joe. The rookie inheritables provided speed through the form of memory gain, the ultimate provided aggression with a security check inheritable, and the deck had access to insane memory advantage thanks to Sora and Joe. In the following set, BT6, the deck even received more support, with a perfect secondary boss monster in the form of the Digimon Sovereign Azulongmon, and a second ultimate which provided an equally aggressive inherit to unsuspend with. Despite this long list of advantages, however, Hexablume still never managed to become the meta-defining threat it had been heralded as. But why? Well, the answer is tragically simple. You can counter the entire deck by digivolving. The cruel fact of the matter is that while Hexablume can stun an entire field of Digimon, as soon as a frozen body digivolves, it gains a source and immediately regains its ability to function. This basically meant that Hexablume was extremely fragile to crackback, lacking any form of meaningful protection beyond its own floodgate. It didn't help that at the time, 2 of the most popular decks included Lord Nightmon in BT5, which thanks to a combination of DP reduction cards could easily remove Hexablume from the board without losing any tempo. And then in BT6, we saw the rise of Gabumon Bond of Friendship, which would hold the crown of the most aggressive and dominant blue deck for several sets. Unfortunately, control decks in Digimon often find themselves in a challenging spot. The game is mechanically extremely proactive, so in order for a more defensive deck to be able to thrive, it must be able to either close the game out quickly when needed, or protect itself from disruption. Hexablume sadly did neither of these things particularly well. The addition of Azulongmon did, at the very least, provide the archetype with a viable way to close the game out when necessary. Should enough bodies accumulate on the field, Azulongmon would be able to smash most if not all of the opponent's security, and potentially unsuspend with Majiramon to swing for game. But this story isn't about Azulongmon. Hexablume managed to find itself a home as a niche tech card in a few blue hybrid decks as the formats progressed, and even picked up a snazzy new alternate art with the release of BT11. New support lines for the generic blue source stripping archetype have continued to slowly trickle in over the years, but to this day, Hexablume has not yet received a proper functional retrain. Until then, Hexablume will continue to illuminate the front page of many fans' binders for years to come. And that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this look into some of the coolest, most tragic cards the game has ever seen. If you'd like to see more or have suggestions for other tragic cards whose tales deserve to be told, be sure to leave those in the comments below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next installment. With that, I am an avid herpetologist. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.